evictions in New York City because they are down by nearly 20% in the last 6 months.
So back in June of 2019, there were substantial changes made in rent laws. Perhaps that is what's making the difference. We're here to talk more about those changes and our rights as tenants is Sia Weaver from Housing Justice for All. Good morning to you. Thanks for coming in this morning. So this is a bit of good news that evictions are down, right? Your organization, along with others, really campaigned for housing for everyone. There was new legislation that went into effect. So what exactly changed that is resulting in this drop?
Sure. So in June 2019, we were successful in passing through the state legislature a variety of changes to our rights as tenants in New York. So now, post-June, it's much more difficult for landlords to evict you. It's much more difficult for landlords to raise the rent beyond what renters can afford. And we've expanded tenants' rights to cover a greater part of the state.
What was causing the evictions?
So prior to June 2019, there was a large incentive for your landlord to push you out because they would be able to raise the rent up basically to the market rate. We've made that a lot harder on the city's rent-stabilized housing stock, so there's just less incentive for landlords to push out rent-stabilized.
So that people know the specifics, how hard if you made it. So what do they need to know about when their landlord comes in and says, I'm going to raise the rent, and you can say, but wait a second.
Yeah, so tenants in New York can only be evicted by a judge. So your landlord can't decide to push you out or to just tell you you have to leave. There's actually a court process that you have to go to, and so many tenants in New York may have their right to counsel. You should look up if you have the right to counsel, and you should make sure that your landlord doesn't push you out without the due process.
But what about the rent increase? How much higher can they go?
Yeah, so the landlords are allowed to raise the rent a small amount annually that's set by the city. So every year the Rent Guidelines Board votes on how high the rent's going to go up. It's usually, in the past few years, it's been between 0% and 2%.
Right.
In the past, if your landlord could get you out, they could raise the rent 20% and then make other improvements to get the apartment up out of rent stabilization to market rate.
So is this
That's no longer true.
Is that only for rent stabilized apartments? So if you have a fair market apartment, right? Can they raise it however much they want to do that?
Yeah, right now they can still do that. You still have the right to fight an eviction in housing court, but it's a lot easier to be pushed out if you aren't rent stabilized.
So these laws really affect those who are in rent stabilized apartments. And also, what if people want to get access to their rights? Where can they go? And do they have to pay for that attorney? Because if they can't afford one, it's pretty hard.
No. So many tenants in New York City have the right to counsel in housing court. So you can go to righttocounselnyc.org to find out if you're eligible for a free attorney in housing court.
Yeah, we have those phone numbers on the screen. Here are some of the resources that you can get through the city.
Yeah, and you can visit our website, housingjusticeforall.org, or you can email us and we'll connect you to a local tenant organization in your community.
And that's not just for rent-stabilized renters, it's for people who live in any apartment.
Absolutely, for people who live in any apartment, and we are still fighting to strengthen and expand rent stabilization so it covers more households, including those who aren't currently rent stabilized.
It's so interesting. You know, this is like everybody's livelihood, right? Renting in New York City, and it's such a complex problem. And landlords think that they have you but they just think that they have you where they want you. But if you are applying for a new apartment, right? There used to be these crazy fees that went along with it as well. Do you still have to pay all those fees, or has that changed as well?
No, so we've passed new changes that apply to everyone, not just rent stabilized tenants, that make it much harder for landlords to exorbitantly charge you for like a broker's fee, for example. So the goal is to not just end evictions, but to actually decrease homelessness by making it easier to get into housing, right?
There's caps on application fees as well. All right, well, we thank you for your time. It's very good information.